What prompted me writing the article was we had a large influx of students here at Northern Chautauqua Catholic School due to the pandemic, and I had a lot of families calling up and asking how many students we could take and asking me if we were going to have face-to-face daily instruction. And so, as the demand for spaces in my building grew, we filled the place up. And it just made me feel like, my gosh, if we had more room, if we had more resources, we could have taken even more students. And so I felt like writing the article because it just made me feel like, having been in a public school for so many years and seeing all of the tax dollars and the money that goes into these schools, and then having to kind of go on a shoestring budget here, it's just like I think about if we just had a fraction of the tax dollars that these public schools are getting, all the wonderful things that we could do here in addition to the great things that we do here every day. So I'm a Fredonia person through and through. Went to Fredonia State, graduated in 1985. I got a job teaching at Fredonia Middle School, teaching middle school math. Did that for 17 years. While I was teaching middle school math, got my master's in math at Fredonia State. And then my principal at the time encouraged me to go into administration. And I was enjoying working in the summer, working construction, and kind of being a little more of a free spirit. But he said, you can't do this forever, and you really have a lot to offer. Go into administration. And so took some classes at St. Bonaventure, took some classes at Fredonia State, and got my administrator's certificate. And shortly thereafter, my principal moved up and became the superintendent at our school, and I was named interim principal, and then I applied for and landed the job as principal, and was there for 16 years, and then just started to get a little disillusioned with public education, the focus on data mining and assessments instead of focusing on children. And so I retired, and I was happily teaching math at Jamestown Community College a couple days a week when I got a call from my old friend Father Dan Walsh, who was a canonical administrator here. He said that the principal here was moving on and asked if I would consider taking the position. And I had to work out some things with my coursework at JCC and finished up that semester, but I've been here since the fall of 2018. We have grades pre-K 3, so 3-year-olds, pre-K 4, 4-year-olds, kindergartners, first graders, second graders, third graders, fourth graders, fifth graders, sixth graders, seventh graders, and eighth graders here at Northern Chautauqua Catholic School. It's more than 165 years old. Parts of it, at least. I know that the gym is not quite that old, but I mean, if you look around, this building was built before there was electricity in it, and so some of the conduit and stuff that was put in place to get electricity in the building, it's kind of oddly placed, but it's an absolutely gorgeous old building. I wish that better care had been taken of it, but we're trying to kind of rejuvenate it and give her a little facelift, but it's a beautiful building and over 165 years old. We've got a library with some old books in it. It smells like a library, it looks like a library. And a lot of classes that you'll see now, everything's done on a smart board or a presentation board or a panel. And we do some of that, but there's also just some project-based learning, good old-fashioned look it up in a textbook, that kind of thing, as opposed to everything going to the internet, Googling something, and not relying on textbooks and things like that. So when the public schools announced that they weren't going to be able to open on September 8th for all-day, everyday instruction, face-to-face with kids, the floodgates kind of opened, and I couldn't even tell you. I've got a folder over there with a waiting list on it. Right now we are in the process of enrolling for next year, and we wanted to get people signed up so we can start doing some planning. So we have opened up internal enrollment for current families for the month of February, and then in March 1st, we'll take a look at our numbers and see if we're going to open up to the general public. But our building is not that large, and we're currently filled to capacity. I think for a small number of students, I think remote learning is not a bad thing. I think but for the majority of kids, particularly younger kids, who's going to force them to log into their Zoom class, particularly if their parents are working, even if their parents are working from home. I just don't think that the remote learning is effective. And when Governor Cuomo was talking about reimagining education with some remote learning in there, I just think that is not a good thing for kids. I think young people need to learn how to communicate. They need to learn how to get along with their fellow students. And they need to get up and come to school every day, not get up in their pajamas and turn on their computer and log into their Zoom classes and maybe pay attention. I couldn't imagine teaching a Zoom class. I wouldn't want to do it. I kind of would like to see a return to the basics and just teaching the whole child. And not constantly trying to measure what the child learned, so that you can say whether or not the instructor did a good job. Just seeing children as beautiful souls instead of data points, or seeing children as the resources that they are, not natural resources that are supposed to be refined into finished products for profit. But just for the value of them as young people and young souls. When I was a middle school student, we had mini courses and fun things. I remember taking a course on boater safety and getting my snowmobile license and doing all kinds of fun things like that. And there just isn't room for things like that in public education anymore. There's just this focus on collecting data and demonstrating progress and demonstrating growth and measurement. We actually were able to, we published what we call the Monarch Chronicle. It was a little magazine for our middle schoolers, and we did one last summer, and then we did one early fall, and then we just did one just a couple weeks ago. So just kind of like a newspaper, old-fashioned paper newspaper. Very proud of that. Our wonderful English teacher, Mr. Peter Howard, he's an accomplished musician. He's a published author. Just doing a great job with that. Our social studies teacher, Ms. Deb Maurer, she does a wonderful job just with a history book. And not to say that she doesn't use technology to present things, but just focusing on a good old-fashioned history book. Private schools are able to focus on the things that we talked about, just kind of old school standards, reading, writing, arithmetic, and old school values. And I think that that's important. I think that public schools maybe have gotten a bit too liberal and a bit too data driven. It seems like every couple of weeks at the public school and toward the end of my career, we were giving some sort of a measurement assessment to see how much the kids had grown. And first it was you would take a baseline in September, and then about midway through the year you would see where the kids were at, and then an assessment in the spring to measure how much they've learned and retained and how much brain growth and achievement that there was. But then you had to do, in addition to state exams, you had to do like some interim exams or interim assessments, and it just got to the point where it was almost a daily thing in some cases, where it was, okay, what kind of data did you collect on these students today? Because everything needed to be measured and everything needed to be plotted and graphed and determined on how much have these kids learned. Everything has to be measured. And not everything can be measured, especially with kids. The kids that are growing at different rates and kids that have different abilities. It just became just cumbersome, and almost the constant assessment just became overwhelming. I think everybody's being pushed to a more of an academic course of study, and there's more and more use of technologies in a lot of classes. Kids are just put behind a computer and asked to research things while the teacher moves around. All students are put on a one-way track, that this idea that they're all going to go to college, they're all going to have to pass certain assessments to graduate, as opposed to there's no more focus on any sort of trades or just hands-on employment and things like that. And that's why you're seeing a shortage of electricians and a shortage of skilled carpenters and professions like that. I've got a number of retirees, so they're able to work here while they're collecting their pension. I have some teachers that are just starting out and getting some experience. I'm not going to. There's quite a bit of turnover here, just because it's very difficult to compete with what the public school pays and compared to what we're able to pay. But the people that are here want to teach. I mean, they want to teach so badly that they'll do it for a bit less, or whatever their life circumstance happens to be, whether it's a retiree, whether it's a person whose spouse carries the major load of the breadwinning, and so they're able to dedicate themselves to this place. One of the wonderful things about our school is we have a lot of volunteers, whether they're parents, whether they're grandparents, whether they're retirees, and we're able to have them come in and help out. And while we don't want to just rely on volunteers to do everyday tasks, we cover our tasks, but then the volunteers come in and they just make it that much easier. And so we'll have a couple of grandmothers will come in and help us with lunch duty, or they'll an aunt or an uncle or mom and dad will come in and help out in the classroom on a semi-regular basis. You can't do that in a public school for a number of reasons, but we're blessed to be able to do that here. We have what's called the Homeschool Association, and they're wonderfully supportive. They have to be. They do a lot of fundraising, because we can't cover all of our costs just on the tuition that we charge in this area. If we charge the tuition necessary to run this place, it would just price people out of this school. So very active Homeschool Association raises quite a bit of money to help us keep the school going, and it makes the tuition affordable for our families. We pretty much run the same schedule as the public school because we need to use their transportation. Last year we implemented some summer camps to try to stave off some of that learning loss from the pandemic shutdown, and because Governor Cuomo said that summer school was not allowed, but summer camps were allowed, we ran some summer camps for our kids in July and then in August, and we were outside a bit. That allowed the kids to take mask breaks and things like that, and we were able to very successfully run a summer camp program here for July and August, and then we started school back on September 8th. Well, I think there is almost a decided difference in the idea of what constitutes safety, and in the public schools, and one of the reasons that public schools are struggling so much to fully reopen is that they had indicated that students need to be 6 feet apart and wear a mask. Now, that was their interpretation of the safety measures. We felt like the guidelines were they wear a mask, but if you're 6 feet apart, the mask can come down. And that's really the major difference as far as we're concerned, is that we have been able to do some very safe things, and have students in the building and not try to keep them 6 feet apart at all times. We've been very blessed here. There and I always knock on wood when I say this because I hate to jinx myself or have karma come back and bite me in the butt, but there has been no student-to-student transmission in this school. There's been no student-to-teacher transmission in this school. There's been no teacher-to-student transmission of the COVID in our school to date. We have had some students and some employees that have gotten the COVID, but they didn't get it here. They got it outside. We're probably about 75–80% Catholic. They come from Dunkirk, they come from Fredonia. We have students from Silver Creek, Westfield. We have students from Pine Valley, Casadega. I think that's the 7. I think in the public school there is such a drive to keep out the bad guys that they keep out the good guys. So, you know, everybody has to be screened thoroughly, or the other piece of it is you can't go to a public school and say I'd like to volunteer, because the impression is you're going to take somebody's job. So you know, you can volunteer coach in a couple of areas, just but not really like in day-to-day to say, oh, I want to come in and volunteer in my granddaughter's classroom or my son's classroom, or volunteer in the cafeteria, because you're taking somebody's work, you're taking somebody's job. There's a contract involved, and that has to be done. It's definitely the union, and you know, I'm not going to bash unions. I was in unions, teachers union and administrators union, and there are some very positive things associated with unions, but there are also some negative things. So, but absolutely, teachers union or a support staff union, they're not going to allow volunteers to come in and, you know, help with any sort of instruction, because you know, a teacher aide or a cleaner should be doing that, or an actual teacher should be doing that kind of thing. And you know, that you're parceling out labor for free to volunteers, and obviously a union isn't going to agree to that. With cell phones and computers and being able to you know, Facebook and chat online and go to chat rooms, and I don't even know what a lot of these things are called anymore, but they're able to communicate more than ever, you know, by texting or whatever it happens to be, and yet they seem to be in some cases lonelier than ever, because there isn't the face-to-face personal interaction. It's always, you know, they're texting, or you know, they're communicating on Snapchat or Facebook or whatever it happens to be. So I think that there's a growing generation of kids that they just don't know how to even sit down and have a conversation, sit down and talk. I don't like to ban these kinds of things, because they do have some educational benefit. So, you know, we don't tell the kids they aren't allowed to bring them. We tell them that they're out of sight in their lockers, in their pockets, unless they're going to use them for an educational purpose, or perhaps at lunch break if they want to play a little game on their phone or do something. But we try to monitor that as much as possible, and really focus on some old school kind of learning. And that's one of the nice things about our little Catholic school here, is there's some very traditional instruction and some traditional learning still going on, and yet we've managed to put in you know, some of this newer technology without losing some of those communication skills that I talked about. The Common Core was designed to try to increase achievement in lower achieving schools, and so they felt like if they had every school in the state teaching the same curriculum, that all the kids should have the same outcomes. But they're not taking into account so many other factors that influence achievement. But they felt like, you know, the writers of the Common Core, a lot of them were never really public school educators. They were higher level. They were higher level instructors, you know, PhDs, and it was kind of almost a money grab in a way. You know, look at a crisis. Okay, so there's a crisis in public education in some big cities. Kids aren't learning. Kids aren't going to school. So okay, we're going to create this regimented program, and everybody's going to do everything our way, and then we sell it and we make a lot of money, and the schools are better and the students are learning more. This constant assessing, the constant data mining, I think plays along with that. And I think that that's where, as you said, your tracking kind of comes in. The canned lessons, the Common Core, the constant assessments, always trying to measure instead of just letting the kids learn and grow. It just became frustrating, and the oversight by the state was more and more frustrating. It just seemed like everything had to be prescribed and determined, and there was no freedom to kind of do a lot of the things that I did as a middle schooler, as a youngster growing up in school. I think that's kind of the case in public school. You get so busy trying to do your job that you don't have that much time to look in other areas, or you kind of find what works and you keep going with it. But then the Common Core will come along, or the next new fad, whether it's every student succeeds, or a race to the top, or no child left behind. It's the next new fad gets foisted on you, and you have to do whatever the state, the public school tells you to do. Teaching is grueling and it's draining. Being an administrator is grueling and draining, and I think that a lot of people just get worn out, and they want to retire and enjoy some peace and not have so much stress in their lives. The cancel culture is very frustrating for me, more so as an individual and looking at individual freedom than it is as principle, other than the fact that there's just so many. It's been beneficial to us. So many schools around us we can't do it, we're going to cancel. We can't do this activity, we're going to cancel. And instead of finding ways to do it, they just cancel. But in terms of the cancel culture for just the political commentators who say something that might be slightly controversial. Oh, we got to get that person off the air, or even some politicians and elected officials who will say something that is slightly, maybe even slightly, or just not just. I don't want to say politically incorrect, but just somebody's always offended by something. And so, if you speak the truth sometimes and somebody's offended by something, and you get asked to resign. And it's interesting how some politicians will just say, no, I'm not going to resign, and others will be like, oh, I'll just quietly go away because I misspoke, or because I said something that offended someone. And it seems like no matter what the intentions, you have the best of intentions, but if you don't say things just the way a certain group wants you to say them, and then you're on the outs and you're canceled. So I guess that's my comment about the cancel culture. Well, I think it makes kids question just about everything, and the information age, on the one hand, is very positive. On the other hand, I don't care who it is. People aren't just one thing. George Washington wasn't just one thing. All these men had flaws. Whether you want to talk about Abraham Lincoln, you want to talk about Thomas Jefferson, they all had flaws. And it's the human condition. And when we talk about the cancel culture, it's like there has to be completely evil intent. At least that's the way sometimes it's portrayed. You're right. I think that some of our heroes are being just torn down, or at the very least, it's to say, okay, this is a really great. This man did some really great things, but he had some flaws. The one thing that we talk about here, and of course we're Christians, we're Catholic, so the only perfect person that I know of was Jesus Christ. There's a lot to offer here that can't be offered at the public school, and that's mainly in terms of just teaching about Judeo-Christian values and the Christian faith and Catholicism. many teachers try to be moral leaders in their classrooms. But I think that, depending on where you teach, what the required curriculum is, that sometimes you're just not able to do that. I mean, if you have a state-driven curriculum that's telling you need to teach this lesson in this way, it becomes harder and harder to be that moral leader. They want everybody teaching the same thing in the same way. And so how do you step out of that box and become the moral leader in your own classroom? I can't say it hasn't penetrated. I can say that we're able to at least fight back against that just by using the faith piece of our instruction. We regularly attend Mass. We pray every day on the morning announcements. The kids pray before they go to lunch. I think it's a very powerful thing, and I think that helps people to be their best selves, and it's something that's been lost in. I think it's been lost in our culture. Not many people go to church anymore, not as many as they used to, and that's why faith-based schools are so important.